We are joint here with the Planning Commission. I don't know, Diane, if you want to call your meeting to order.
It's 6:31 and yes, we all ready? Okay, we're ready.
Excellent. Any agenda additions or changes for tonight?
Not for me.
No. No, great, moving on. Public to be heard. This is a portion of the meeting when folks in the community can bring comments, concerns, questions to the boards. In this case, Planning Commission and City Council. I don't see anyone in the room. Is there anyone online that has anything they'd like to say or comment on tonight? If so, please raise your hand. Or if you don't know how to raise your hand, just wave your hand in the video or start talking. I don't see anyone
No,
ready to make any comments. So looks
okay,
like Planning Commission hasn't had.
that's good. Okay, so, we have minutes. I hear a motion to approve the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes. Second.
Okay, any discussion on the minutes?
Yeah, I have a couple of small corrections. Page 2 at the top. Just sort of semantics, instead of local churches, I said places of worship. I like to inclusive. And I also have a comment on member updates. That wasn't exactly what I said, but I'll try to clarify that later in the meeting tonight.
Okay. So you're good with that then?
I'm okay with this later.
All right. All those in favor with the corrections noted? Any opposed? All right. We're done with that one. So we're up to number 5.
Moving right along.
Hey, I told you it was gonna take all that long.
All right, update on the Connected Junction TOD master plan. We have Chris Ewan, our community development director.
So originally, the plan for this meeting was for most of it to be focused on the Connected Junction transit development draft plan. But on January 28th, we were instructed to pause the project because of federal funding uncertainties. And as of today, that pause has not been lifted. So that's where we are today. This CCRBC says we are likely to hear more next week. So yeah, I think this was, the pause was originally because of that OMB memo that said all disbursements must be paused immediately, and then that was rescinded. It's a legal challenge. But as a discretionary grant, this is there still needs to be more clarification on whether or not the current administration is willing to continue with this this project. That's all that I really know at the moment.
Okay, so my question is that we have a preliminary report that you said you got. I was in our minutes from the last meeting. So if we have to punt because it's not getting paid for, can we move with what is available? Or
We
do
should.
or do we have to wait until we get the final product?
So actually what I had received was what they call the big ideas report, which is one chapter of the draft plan. There isn't actually that much to the big ideas report that you haven't already seen. It's just more elaboration on the kind of general principles of what the Connected Junction project was trying to achieve. I have not seen the draft plan itself yet. I know the consultant was partway through making that, and you know, if for some reason this project doesn't wake up again, we could ask for what has been done, and I think take it in-house to the extent possible.
I'd also be curious to know how much it would cost to get it finished, if we were to need to do that, if there's a way to figure it out. I wouldn't necessarily start on that until we know, but just be curious because committee, they put an awful lot of time and effort into, and staff did too, getting to this point.
The other part of that is, were they being paid by RPC?
Well, the RPC was the project manager for this, that took federal funds to pay.
I mean, the parallel is, USA, for example, all the contractors that work for USA can't get paid. They have outstanding invoices, so.
There was an order to stop work on a specific date, and any work that was done before that, they're still owed, right?
Well, yeah. I know, but yeah. So that's a bigger question that you can answer at this point.
Marcus.
If,
Go ahead, Marcus.
if we don't get the funding, can you generally in top, 30,000 foot level, summarize what would be worst case scenario if we could not move forward?
We would take the work that has been done, which is quite a bit of work, but it's already, and I mean, I guess there's a question of whether or not the city might want to directly fund the rest of the project to wrap it up. If that was not possible, we could take the product in-house and, continue to the best of our ability.
And again, for residents' clarity, can you summarize what this is impacting? What are the projects or what are the things that we're talking about that are being impacted by funding or not funding, and whoever's doing it?
The Connected Junction Transit Oriented Development Master Plan is a policy document that's supposed to shape a lot of other regulations that the city development of the city has to follow. So including the land development code, our zoning regulations. There's some direction about there's some stuff about what to prioritize capital investments in. So, and then there's a lot of what comes out of the TOD project, the Connected Junction project, is meant to feed into the comprehensive plan and also another round of land development code amendments. So, yeah, we would need to take the product that has been created so far, try to refine it to a useful level, and make use of that.
I guess I'll revise my question about how much it would cost. I'd be curious to know, if not tonight, from you and Regina, if we don't have a lot of time for the budget, if it would extend into fiscal year 26, and if so, if it's worth discussing in our next two meetings, adding money to the budget just in case, or discussing where we might find it otherwise. I really am not loving the idea of letting this go. And I'm perfectly confident that it could be taken in-house and be done very well. But that impacts already very tight capacity on our staff.
Well, in addition to that question, I would add, can we pay, if we pay for it, can RPC then reimburse us for the cost? So because it was coming out of their grant that they had gotten, and therefore we're not out those monies.
Whereas the state, who's still in session right now and desperately wants this housing built, willing to come in with an appropriation would help us, or help CCRPCs. We're in the same boat because I'm sure ours isn't the only one. RPCs, not CCRPCs, but RPCs that are.
That's right. How there was like a half a dozen or better.
The project affects 10 different communities in the state, but the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission is actually managing all of those.
That's a big.
Yeah, but so to answer your question, we can definitely look at what the remainder of that cost is if we have an invoice yet from Framework up until this date, certain last week. And then, if I have enough information, I'll get it incorporated into the narrative before it goes out tomorrow. Otherwise, I'm sure we can have it by Wednesday night to talk about it.
Awesome. Does that make sense to do? Yeah. I guess the only other thing is maybe we can work on sooner than later getting something rescheduled for 6 or 8 weeks from now for all of us to do this again, hoping that it at least be scheduled so that it is released and we can talk about it and we can not go through the trying to then schedule 2 months out for something to get together.
So just a small detail, Chris, they were supposed to present their draft report tonight, correct?
That's great.
So one assumes that they do have some kind of draft report.
It's,
And the question is whether or not they can release that without getting paid, et cetera. So, again, I mean, maybe having a conversation with them about what the product is at this point.
Yeah.
And going back to the presentation they made to us, when was that, December, I think it was, or November?
Yes.
Yeah, but there was a substantial amount of conceptual detail in that plan. So I would be curious to see what they have now.
Down to this one, ready to go to the next one? Sandwich boards, our favorite topics. Okay.
You too?
Hey, you know, we get a lot of discussion on sandwich boards. And to be perfectly honest, when I went and I read what's available online to tell us what the short narrative is on what we want, I went, oh, you guys pulled the very piece of sandwich boards that we thought was going to be helpful, that people could actually have the sandwich boards out on Pearl Street. They'd still have to pull them in at the end of the day. We didn't pull that part, but at least have it more than 15 feet from the door. So the 50, I think a lot of them are gonna have a problem with the 15 feet from the door, especially in the shopping center.
So that gets us to the point, and I'll speak for myself. You want to introduce this?
Yes.
Oh, that'd be best.
So
yeah,
we just
actually,
have, Chris is gonna stop a little bit that explains current regs versus what was proposed, and then we can go from there.
right. So this is literally, it's just a screenshot of the existing regulations. It's in one, just one paragraph, and I'll summarize what it says, and we can go back to this if you need to scrutinize the text. And this is the proposed regulations by the Planning Commission from November 2024. And this is the second page, and it's available to go back to if we need to. In summary, it's size limits are the same. Right now, it says the businesses shall not co-locate sandwich boards. It doesn't say how close counts as co-locating. As proposed by the Planning Commission, it says no closer than 12 feet from another sandwich board. Both say only during business hours. Right now, it says maximum 15 feet from the front door of the business, and as proposed by the Planning Commission, it was maximum 15 feet from the door, driveway, or walkway of a business. And I will say, but the last point over here wasn't really discussed very much with the Planning Commission. I mean, this is something that's this technicality I kind of looked into more afterwards when it came up as an issue. Signs on publicly owned property for public notices are exempt, and that was not included in what the Planning Commission had submitted to City Council. So by the direction of the City Council, there was some change made to this for the version warned for public hearing. So basically turned the clock back and took out the driveway and walkway provision. And I added the signs on publicly owned property for public notice is exempt. I put it back, but into the exemptions. section of the code. So, yeah, that's what I have.
I'd be curious to learn more about your discussions around the topic as you consider this throughout your process.
Well, we had discussed the fact that who's gonna enforce them on Pearl Street, understanding that a lot of the people are putting signs out on Pearl Street because the businesses are good, what, 200 feet or more from the street? So if it's only 15 feet from the front door, that puts it out in the parking lot, or where people are parking, which is not really gonna be really effective. I could see why somebody wants to have it on Pearl Street. For either of the shopping centers that happen to be there. So, I thought it was humorous, we had a gentleman come before us and said the reason he wasn't bringing the sandwich boards on in because it was too heavy. Of course, he's speaking to a person who had to pull those sandwich boards in with a dolly on a weekly basis. So, I'm kind of going, I think he could do it. Not an excuse I was willing to accept, but he at least presented it as the why he wasn't doing it. So, but that was part of our discussion is how to get, we're trying to be business friendly and we understand the reason they're doing it. And we're essentially saying that no. And so my next question is, who's going to enforce this? Okay, we have Regina and Chris going out there, Terry going out there to patrol at the end of the day. I realize our sidewalks roll up around like 7 or 8 o'clock, but it still means, going out there at the end of business and saying your sign's still here.
I think that was going to be, so a couple thoughts on that. I think I personally asked for this to be brought up because I think for a while, I think some of us felt that we simply didn't want them. I think you can be business friendly and understand, for instance, I counted from Five Corners intersection to the West Street jug handle, 15 feet taken into account, 60 to 80 possibilities. That's a lot. Now, we won't get all of them, but when you count all the businesses and all the possibilities on that one stretch, that's how many you could cut out. I personally would love to see it removed and have a 1 or 2 year transition period where those landowners can adjust their signage. I think we made it so they could have 2 larger, so I'm thinking of, for instance, Post Office Square. I think the new regulations mean that they can have the larger one, now they can have a second larger one, not a slightly smaller one. So like my dog groomer, for instance, is around the corner. And I get why they're concerned about visibility. But those design of those strip malls is very old school. It's not design that we would do now. It's not something we would have now. We would have them street forward. So it brings up 2 things for me. I think we should transition them in. I think we have an economic development fund that we can explore having micro grants for the landowners to help them enlarge their signs over that period of time, up to a certain point. I've got an option in mind, I won't say now, and say, this is gonna sunset after a year or 2. And we're hoping that these businesses enlarge their signs. The enforcement part, we've had this for a long time. Either way, people aren't doing it. So having it partway, having it slightly available, people are just ignoring it. There's like 8 out tonight on the way here. Then we have the issue of the fun conversation I heard you have about when someone's open and when they're not. If I opened a studio at Post Office Square, I'll leave my sign out all the time because I have an online presence, is the argument. That sounds like, I've popped over to the Realtor on a whim as a joke after being out for a night. They're not open at 2 in the morning. So I'd love to see some kind of definition added to the, like research around the definition added to the LDC of what open means. For a physical brick and mortar business. Because that just presents issues that are more than just the sandwich board when we try to, move forward as a city. So those are some of my concerns around this, but I'm absolutely 100% realizing that a lot of those businesses are tucked in here and there. But a lot of the folks that have these aren't, a lot of them are 8 feet from the road. You know, McGillicuddy's building, Crescent Connector, along Park Street, Main Street. You know, I mean, they're literally 12 feet from the curb. Do they need a sandwich board also on the sidewalk, and their sign is right there, this kind of, and just the sheer number.
Well, it depends on sandwich boards, okay? Well, I have my own feeling of sandwich board. But the thing is that they were initially supposed to be, hey, here's the sale for the day, here's the sale for the week, come on in. They were really popular when there was the, sales in April, when, you know, the inventory tax was prevalent. That's gone away. But to drive people in to say, here's the sale, you know, because especially, let's say the One Asian Market is in the back where backstage used to be. You don't see them, even if they put a sign on their front door or the window, you wouldn't see it unless you actually went to their business. And I heard discussions about the VFW sign, because they too are tucked in the back. You can see them from the road, but you can't really see them from the road, unless you're really looking in there. So the purpose of having the sandwich boards are essentially to say, hey, here's the sale of the day, or the sale of the week. And they've transitioned to just being there at this point, which is what.
Yeah, I mean, if it was something like, you can be out for 7 business days a month, but some of the businesses on Pearl Street have turned it into a 365-day-a-year sale. And I think that's the new method of doing business, 20% off all the time.
Right. Elaine?
Can you just clarify for me, Raj, is the goal of making that change to reduce visual clutter?
Yeah, I think we have, you know, it's interesting, when we did some of this work before I was involved in a lot of boards, I don't know if it was Heart and Soul or there was another one before that, or in Junction, I can't remember the name right now. Someone had the interesting idea of going around and to make a point and photographing some of our approaches, but in small bits. And they asked the community on these giant poster boards, you know, what do you think of this? And a lot of people like me were like, where is that? Right over there. It's Park Street, it's Pearl Street, some of these approaches that we have. And I think it's clutter. I think it impedes sometimes, and there's an attempt to mitigate that. I think it impedes sightlines. I think it impedes cyclists and walkers, but mostly it's visual, it's aesthetic, and clutter.
So I just want to point out that we talk a lot about having an economic development effort of some kind outside of the large projects that we're doing.
Mhm.
And there's not a lot that we currently do, if anything, for businesses. And when we did that charrette a couple months ago, and we envisioned taking all the buildings at Post Office Square and bringing them up to Pearl Street and like, or putting another building there. I mean, that's a really exciting proposition. But we do so little for our businesses that to take away the sandwich boards feels a little excessive to me. I mean, I know it's clutter, but it's less expensive to have a sandwich board, having been a business owner myself with a business that was far back from the road. I relied on my sandwich board. I changed the message as often as I could. I put it on wheels so I could get it in at the end of the day. You know, we needed it. And while it's cluttered on the road, and yes, some businesses have turned it into a 365-day-a-year sale, it's important. And like an organization like the VFW that, you know, that's all they use to advertise their chicken dinner or pancake breakfast or whatever.
That's right.
And
All of it,
yeah, I
as a
mean, just,
nonprofit.
right, they need it. So I really, like, I get it. I totally get the aesthetic piece, and we're working on that in so many different ways. I just feel like this particular issue might be a lower priority and might be able to transition more as we develop more on Pearl Street. I just would rather not impose this on businesses at this time.
So just to kind of riff on your point, but like we, and maybe the council doesn't have this problem, but the planning commission struggled to get public input on everything we do.
Yeah.
With the glaring exception of the rent registry. That said, as we have been working on this most recent tranche of updates to the LDC, the signs, but specifically sandwich boards, has been the subject where we have received the majority, although limited, as you point out, Raj, it's not necessarily a representative sample, but it is the feedback we're getting, asking for leniency or flexibility around sandwich boards. And so I bring that up simply to say, again, not that it's representative, but whoever is paying attention to what the planning commission is doing right now, the ones that are speaking out care about sandwich boards. And so I don't know what the solution is, but I do think it is important that we take the subject maybe more seriously than myself personally, not a small business owner who would prefer not to see sandwich boards would give the subject, because the limited feedback we are getting is that it does matter to these businesses.
Marcus, you got your hand up. Marcus?
Yep. So what I hear is a couple of different problems. I just want to say out loud and make sure that I'm acknowledging. So what I hear first is a concern that there are businesses that are potentially doubling up.
We lost your audio, Marcus.
It's probably not my audio. It's probably more like my voice. So my apologies. I will do my very best. But you've got two problems. It sounds like one with businesses that are doubling up on their signage. So I am ABC company, and I put out a sandwich board that also says that I'm ABC company. Then you have the other problem of giving them the latitude that when they have a deal or a sale or something that's going on in a moment, that they have the ability to promote that. I think what my concern is somewhat similar to Elaine's, in the fact that I feel like we're at a time right now with inconsistent, again, with a rule that's been on the books, with no real enforcement. We're moving forward, and if we were to moving forward, I think we question consistency in enforcement. And I think inconsistent enforcement is even more problematic. So I think this might be a period of time in which I'm more inclined to lean toward how do we look at economic development in order to help solve some of these issues by bringing some means, but more likely education and assistance to businesses to help them do what they need to do in order to be successful in the city. I also don't want clutter. I think there needs to be a balance. But right now, my concern with the inconsistency of enforcement makes me feel like if we can't be consistent, then we shouldn't have it on the books. Because honestly, people will just start to ignore it, right? Look at how we're dealing with political signs, right? There was a general understanding around this, which seems to be inconsistent from the rules, which has caused confusion. There has been inconsistency around this sign rule, even though it's been on the books. And so there are some who violate more egregiously than others. And it goes to a bigger discussion that I think at some point we need to have around how enforcement works in the city. What is the priority of that enforcement? I mean, we have talked about, and I don't want to dive into the rental registry, but in that discussion, talked a lot about how the fact we needed somebody in community development to help start to enforce those building rules, those codes, doing that work as we're trying to rejuvenate and revive this community. And we don't have that. So we're not doing a very good job enforcing a lot of rules. This is just one of them. So right now, I would say that I'm, again, leaning toward how can we leverage our ability to educate and support the community to be successful.
Amber, anything?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Mark has said. I think that my focus would be on the economic development and trying to give some education to folks about marketing their business, because I do feel that a lot of these signs are doing exactly that. You know, when is the chicken barbecue? It's not, it is not the case usually that it's just an advertisement to find the location, like the dog groomers. That's probably the exception to the rule in this conversation. And I agree with what you said, Raj, about the hours of operation. I mean, I've noticed 2 separate businesses in the city who leave their open signs on and they have sandwich board signs out. I think the last thing I'll say is that I also, from my perspective, it is the aesthetics. When Chris went through and did that first round of just kind of telling folks, you know, this is on the books and you got to put it away. It was just a very different feel and look and feel when you drove down Pearl Street and saw all those signs put away. And I do think that a significant amount of businesses are complying with that rule at this time. There are some that just never complied with it and are never going to comply with it until it's not on the books. I think a happy medium would be balancing. I don't know if we could do a sunset, you know, say, well, let's do the rule as proposed by the PC and, you know, leave it on the books for 2 years, which will allow us the ability to develop that community, that economic development committee. And then at the end of those 2 years, we should be in a very different position. So we allow it for now, but with the understanding that this is the goal to get there.
Yeah, I think those are all really valid points. I think I absolutely agree about the economic development. You know, we've been wanting to start that for some time. It's just not there on the list yet for various reasons. This group has talked about it a number of times. There's hopefully some volunteers in there start getting together. We really do need to get that going. I am, again, also proposing that if we're going to sunset it and if we're going to do something different, that we figure out a way to help the property owners that own the signs, the real signs, so they can make those changes, because those aren't going to be cheap. You know, if we did something like 10% of your cost or up to $1,000 or whatever it is out of the economic development penny that we have now, which unfortunately is here, I think is all spoken for, but that topic is coming back around, because once the assessment's done, we have to revisit that amount. So I'm open to absolute, like, it doesn't have to be the way I'm saying, but I feel very, very strongly about the open hours, trying to find a definition and trying to really kind of, you know, if we're not going to do it all, then let's prioritize the businesses that are hidden. You know, so for instance, if you're a business in the McGillicuddy's building 12 feet from the road, maybe there's no sandwich board there. If you're Asian market and you're behind and you don't have a street frontage, even though, you know, then maybe that is good. But if you're a certain distance away from the door, but I'd really love to see an effort made or a deadline put on it to make sure we're going to put that effort forward as a city and really start working with them to find a better solution. And, you know, I just don't see as many of them when you go to other communities, and we just have these I think we drive through the community and walk through and bike through the community, and we don't see often. I think when you start to walk the community more, you start to see more. But we have these areas that really need a lot of help. And I'm hoping that the rules we're putting in place, all the work you did as a group, is gonna start bringing some of those changes. And I just feel like leaving these out there at the amounts that are possible kind of undoes some of that. If that makes sense.
So I don't disagree with what you said. However, I am trying to have, as the committee is also trying to do, is to try to get some economic development done by a land development code. Whereas we should be having economic development done by an individual or someone in the community development department to help businesses. I know we haven't really had, and I know Greg Morgan was on here and he seems to have disappeared. But was the last person I knew that was on the economic development committee. And I'm not sure who was on with him, but it was not a large number. So how do we work with our businesses? Okay, I mean, we can impact them and do a rental registry and they can flood you with information. Or we can actually be proactive and say, this is what we'd like to accomplish, and this is what we need you to tell us what is working for you and what's not working for you. Because this is what's not working for us, and we want to see something change, and we need help from you to have this to occur. But there's no one that I'm aware of in Chris's department that's stepping up to fill that role. So how do we get this done?
You say has the capacity
Or,
to take on that role.
or has the capacity, yeah. So Marcus, please jump
Hold
in.
on. Scott's been trying to.
I've been trying to get something in here,
Okay.
sorry. I want to come back to a couple of things I heard, from Raj and Elaine. When we did the strategic plan, I volunteered to go around and canvass our businesses to try to get them to the workshop. So I talked to almost every business. I didn't go up Pearl Street, but, I didn't want to go to McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts, but I did canvass 5 corners and I talked to a lot of the business owners. And, the person who owns, the liquor depot next to Rockies, Duncan Harvey. He and I had a conversation and, also I talked to Jake Tron about this as well. Is the thing that's missing is we're assuming, like everything we do, we're assuming everything has to be directed through city staff, okay? That puts an enormous burden on city staff. What I think, and Duncan and I talked about this, I think what we need to do is look at trying to mobilize volunteers who can be the lead on this. One of the problems we have in Essex Junction, the 5 corners, we have a lot of really unique restaurants, for example. Maybe too many bakeries, but that's another point. And we just lost one. McWayman's was out of business. And that was the only Filipino restaurant in Chittenden County, maybe in the state. And they had great food. Nobody knew about it. When I talk to people in Shelburne, my friends in Shelburne and Chittenden County, other places in Chittenden County, nobody knows about these restaurants. Now, coming back to the signs, we spend an enormous amount of time on signs. Probably 2 meetings. And it's not just sandwich boards, it was everything. There's probably violations that people have window signs, their windows are supposed to be, what is that, I can't remember, 25% covered, okay? If you walk down, Railroad Street, that's in violation. There's a couple places in violation. So the question is, this thing about enforcement, we can't enforce everything. It's just, when this comes up with the sandwich board, it becomes public information and then you enforce it. But the point is, I think we need to think of a way to mobilize volunteers more effectively. Not just assume everything has to be done by city staff, because that's an enormous workload on them. And there are people, older people who are, who are retired, who can volunteer for this stuff and mobilize people. The other problem with businesses, those people are stretched. They're always working. And Jake will be very happy to communicate with you at the coffee shop. But he's got 3 businesses now. You can't expect him to volunteer time, but there are people who will volunteer. It's just a question of finding them. And then your economic development committee can prosper and you can get people together. But this thing about signs, you don't need sandwich boards if you have a good communication and marketing outreach. And they don't. There's no church street marketplace for 5 corners. There should be a 5 corners marketplace, so that people know what's going on. And I think Duncan's willing to help. You know, he's willing to volunteer some time. We could just mobilize some of these people. We could get some ideas together, and that might be a transition to, you know, not having to have sandwich boards everywhere. And one last thing, I do agree. I think the businesses that are 5 feet from the street, they don't need a sandwich board. You know, they've got their front right there. McGillicuddy's doesn't need a sandwich board. But VFW, that's a different matter. They're not visible from the street.
And again, you know, I'd say, I think Marcus is waiting, but I think those are great ideas. I think there's also.
It's part of the comprehensive plan. It's a longer discussion, but we need to mobilize the advantages and the promotional things with 5 corners and Essex Junction. It's not getting out there. People don't know about it.
Yeah, and I'm not even talking about 5 corners. This is the outskirts of you don't actually see them. There's one, I think, down there. Beside their city one.
Well, Park Street, there's a few, yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't consider that 5, I'm thinking that's further out, but.
Please, Marcus, go ahead.
So I'll just add in, because I've had this discussion before and I've thrown this idea out in other conversations, but you know, as we've had the discussion around housing, and I say this because of the fact that I think some of the same players are involved, whether we're talking about the business owners of commercial properties in the city, or we're talking about housing in the city. I wonder if it wouldn't be prudent to have a discussion as to whether or not it would be a good idea for a subcommittee between the council and the planning commission to potentially get together with developers / business owners to talk about some of these kinds of issues, to see if we can't collectively work together to come up with some ideas that would support the business community, and support our objectives as the city.
It's an excellent idea. Are you volunteering to lead it up, Marcus?
I would be willing to participate as one of the, I don't know, 5 or 6 ones that I'm on right now. Sure, why not? I'm not, you know, look, I'm not trying to volunteer people right now. I'm just, again, throwing out an idea, because if we're talking about an economic development volunteer committee, we're talking, you know, I think one of the things that we should discuss around these things is how do we get the stakeholders, you know, to Scott's point, how do we get the stakeholders to the table? And sometimes it may take community leaders to do that. And so I'm not saying we obviously don't have to decide that right now. I'm just kind of throwing that out there as a thought, as one of the ways that we look at, again, educating and working with the community to try to look at these things and improve upon it. Because, you know, to Raj's point, yeah, I also want to try to work with these commercial owners, to see how, if there's a way to support them to promote those businesses. So look, we can attract people to come into the community, as well as help those businesses be more successful. And, you know, this idea came to me because as I was reading through the LDC in consideration of this, it was not particularly clear to me either who was the responsible party if there was a violation. Is it the business? Is it the owner of the property? in some circumstances, I have seen regulations that, it would be, I'm not saying within our community necessarily, but I've seen this applied in such a way that, the owner of the property would be responsible for these kinds of things because you want them to be educating their, their renters, their lessees. But I've also seen it the other way. So, that was one of those pieces that I did not have clarity in reading our regulation here. So I don't know if we need to add that, but I just wanted to mention that as, again, we're trying to bring these people together, trying to find solutions to this that is, that works for everybody to try to get to a point where this community looks, feels, and is prosperous in the way that we expect and want it to be.
So, to answer your direct question, Marcus, for the most part, landowners are responsible for, meeting the zoning regulations. I think it's very clear, we definitely need to address an economic development program at some point in time. It's on the list, it needs to get fleshed out in the list. Whether that happens through the comprehensive plan or there's some way that we can figure out how to do it sooner than that. We will get there for sure. Super appreciate the idea that volunteers can do it and it shouldn't all be on us. Big fan, like that concept. With the exception of, it is very hard for me to believe that there wouldn't be any draw on staff. And our current situation is, there is no capacity with the list that we have in front of us and the number of projects coming our way. So I think, there's a number of different things that will come into play to figure out what's the right economic development future for us. And some of this also is tied into what happens with the state designation programs and how they're reworking those. There's kind of a couple of whole different things going on there. So we hear that very clearly. We got it on the list. We will get it sorted out. Tonight, we need to make a decision about what's happening with these sandwich boards. And it's a little bit interesting to me because, particularly with the Church Street example, there are nothing but sandwich boards walking up and down Church Street. So just business helping committee is not equate itself to no sandwich boards.
Oh, you mean Church Street, but
Yes.
yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I was gonna say Church Street and Essex Junction, I think.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Sorry.
The conversation was good.
I want to hear over
Okay, so, I think we've got a couple of different pathways here. We can stick with the sandwich board regulations that are in place currently in the land development code. We can switch back over to the planning commission's amendments. We can try to do something to address two particular topics that I've heard. One is, can we define when a business is open? Maybe we can think through that. Can we create the regulations so that sandwich boards are only allowed for businesses that are a little bit more hidden? Chris and I have spoken about that. It is a little bit difficult in the world of content neutrality, because when a landowner, who's the responsible party, comes forward with a zoning permit for a sign, we need to be able to read the sign to tell whether it's a business in the back or it's a business in the front. So it's a little bit complicated, and we would have to do some more research to figure out whether there's some other time, place, or manner way of actually achieving that.
Specifically, that probably won't work for the VFW situation, because that's actually kind of an off-site sign. They're borrowing space from the bank property, basically. So it's basically the bank being like, all right, you can put, well, the landlord for the bank being like, you could put your sign there. And yeah, unless you can unless you can determine whether or not that's permissible based on the content, that's, you know, I don't know how to regulate that.
One question on that, just so I'm clear on what you're saying. So for that example, I would imagine it doesn't really matter on that 3-lane exit what side of that is on. Let's pretend it doesn't matter to them because we haven't asked them. If it's on the opposite side from the bank, it's their landlord's land, just like it's the landlord's land for Verizon across the street, putting it 200 feet away on the sidewalk, basically. So I guess I'm not understanding why. Yes, if the bank owns that lot, that's different. I guess it's a different, but if their own landlord owns the same property, that's what everybody else is doing right now. Domino's doesn't own that mall, so they're putting, if they were to put a sign out, it'd be on their landlord's land across the parking lot. So why is that different for the VFW? That makes any sense.
Well, I'm saying, I guess, maybe it is ultimately the same, but like, from my perspective, I'm not sure there's a way to regulate either of those situations without stepping on content neutrality, because if the bank is allowed to put a sandwich board out there,
But that would
they
be a
could
place
also,
restriction. I mean, it sounds like a place restriction as opposed to a content restriction. But I don't know. Is
So
it
it's
worth it?
either sandwich boards are allowed there or sandwich boards are not allowed there.
that's fine.
That would be the simplest, cleanest,
Okay.
way to do it.
Gotcha.
So while you're thinking about sandwich boards, what about the forever signs for realtors? That this place is for let, and there's absolutely nothing for let in the mall. You'll have a sign out that says that this is X, Y, and Z, realtor, call me. Well, that's nice, but it's 365 every day, all hours of the day. Those signs are out there. Recently, it's been, gosh, I guess, there's 2 or 3 signs, those realtor signs in front of a local business that just moved out. Last week on Pearl Street. And it's kind of like what I was undecided if they were renting, car spaces for a winter, because they've done that, or is this renting the place or buying the place? I was unsure as to what exactly was going on because the signs are out there 365. It's kind of like, okay, so what do we do with those too? I mean, they're just as offensive as the sandwich. So, Amber, you got your hand up.
You can finish, Diane.
Okay, so I'm looking at more of, I hate to say it, but I think we need to, I miss the Essex Business and Professional Association that was here when I moved in. They at least had contacts and interactions with their members. Not everybody was a member, but they had their membership. So I'm thinking we need to do something for our businesses, because we're gonna tread on their toes, we're gonna kick their shins, and we're gonna say, you're not doing anything for me. And we're gonna have to say, you're right, but we're trying to, declutter the street. So how are we going to work together to work this out? Because it's not, I don't think we can have anybody out there constantly at 8 o'clock saying, darn sign's still here. You closed, when? It's just like, come on, their signs are dark and the sign's still out there.
I guess I don't quite get that logic, that we don't enforce anything. We don't enforce traffic laws 365, 24/7, but they're enforced when it's convenient to be enforced.
Well,
So
How many people have you seen pass you at 5 bars? Okay,
they're enforced when it's convenient to be enforced. So when it's not convenient to be enforced, if the enforcers are doing something else at that time, for lack of a better word, then they're not being enforced. Amber, are you ready?
Regina, I was just gonna ask what your thoughts were on the whole sunset concept.
I think it's probably workable. I think South Burlington used a sunsetting approach at some point in time for some sign issues. It was not specific to sandwich boards, but it was essentially what signs they were allowing on, I want to say Williston Road, but it could have been citywide. So I would say, though, I think the sunset was not 2 years. The sunset was, I think, I'm making all this up, but I think sort of a much longer time period, like 10 years, but that's because they were permanent signs, I believe. And so it were sort of, they were intending to let the businesses kind of change over. And as the new businesses came into place, then they would realize that they should switch over to these other signs. So I think it's a possibility for us to look into that. The enforcement of sandwich boards is going to remain difficult. I will say, no matter what we do. If you
So
want
is
to
our-
restrict, yes, go ahead.
Sorry, Regina. So is our goal with this meeting to try to nail down something for Chris to basically come back to both committees, or what is the goal of this meeting, I think is one of the questions that I have.
Good question. I think if by chance there was clarity, we could, in theory, introduce that concept at the council's public hearing for the Land Development Code Amendment and introduce it into this, and then set a second council public hearing. If this is gonna require some more effort and research for Chris, we probably will move forward with the Land Development Code Amendment as warned by the council. And this will kind of be with we'll sort of slot this for the next round of LDC amendments. That's my take. Chris?
I was just gonna say the same, like, if there's no desire for an urgent change to this, basically at this point, any change to the warned version of the LDC amendments will result in one more month of a delay into. I mean, unless there are other things that needed to be changed anyway. And there's always gonna be a running list of things that need to be addressed, and there could even be drafted versions ready to go. And that can be prepared for the whenever there's a next round of LDC amendment, which I would imagine, has to come from the TOD project and also the comprehensive plan within the next year or two. Yeah, that's it.
And just to clarify, as it is warned right now, it is pretty much the same as it was before, with the clarity around what close proximity being 12 feet. Correct?
15.
And that's 15. And the goal of the planning commission's amendments were to allow essentially the VFW's sign or other signs that were further from the entrance for these businesses in the back that are further from a right of way or public view, and to make that allowable and not something that city staff should be enforcing. That I just want to clarify the scenario.
Sort of. So I think the VFW is actually really, it's a more complicated case than was really being addressed.
Or Shannon's.
But other businesses that are, let's say, businesses at the shopping center, the big lot shopping center, if they wanted to have something by Pearl Street, as the planning commission, what was that?
The Asian market example.
Right.
On the back.
Right, as the plan, the version that was recommended by the planning commission would have allowed that, because it's 15 feet within by the driveway or walkway. The VFW sign, first of all, it was always too big to fit this category. It was left out by the time, even when it was closed. So I'm not sure that would have been. So anyway, unless I suppose they could put a smaller, a little one, a normal sandwich board and drag it, or I mean, it would be associated with a bag. I don't.
But I mean, either way, either version of what existed prior and the proposed regulations that we held on. For them, the concept of having to bring it in is the same.
Yeah.
So that isn't changing with any of them. They're not supposed to be out all the time. And so if we're not gonna change anything, and we're gonna go back to what they proposed, what the planning commission proposed, I'd like to at least address this concept of like business hours. Bringing them in and try to get some random, more communication, education. I think you and your department did a very good job of getting out and speaking with business owners, providing literature, doing that outreach. I'd rather see more of that than a ticket, you know, just reminders. But if somebody's like just ignoring us, then sure, there's an enforcement. So I'm not too worried about the enforcement. I hope the enforcement looks more like what's been done to date, you know. But for those that just leave them out and are just not going to respond, then yeah, I mean, just like everything else, there's attempts at mitigation and enforcement.
Your turn.
Oh, on the VFW, I never took the VFW case as an example of what we were talking about here because of the nature of that sign. But I do want to acknowledge that, Chris, I really did appreciate your response to the community when there was some outcry about the VFW. I thought it was a really great response, really acknowledging how we want to work with the community, acknowledging how we, you know, again, are just trying to do our very best to create a great community. So it was really well done, and more of that is going to be greatly appreciated in the future. And I'm going to bring this up just because I don't want to lose this while we're talking about signs, but I did have a question in regards to a line in the LDC regarding the changeable electric signs with changeable messages. There is on page 198 of the LDC, section 5. This is chapter 7, section 714, number 5, letter D. It says can only consist of alphabetic or numeric characters on a plain background and shall not include any graphic, pictorial, video, or photographic images. And I read that and I was a little concerned, only the fact that it seems like that going into play, CVE would be in violation, potentially in violation of that, if I'm reading it correctly. Based on what I have historically seen, the kind of images that I see come up on their sign. And I don't know if this language if this is new language, or if this is language that's been here that, again, we haven't enforced it or whatever, but it's here.
Just gonna say that is an excellent question and we can research that and get back to you, Marcus. That's how it's warned for the public hearing and we should address that at the public hearing. This is specific to the sandwich board conversation tonight and we've got to stay focused and get an answer here.
We
She's
can't,
getting so much
we
better.
can't say,
She's getting so much
just,
better.
just so I understand content neutrality, we can't say nonprofit or tax exempt businesses are exempt from the sandwich board sign laws, however we come out of it.
Absolutely correct.
We cannot say that.
And you're also saying we can't.
So we
say-
can't say that the sandwich board that's attached to the sign at St. James Place on Lincoln Street isn't in violation, even though we've decided not to enforce signage on places of worship. And we can't say that that's what I was told when I inquired.
Churches are a entirely different ballgame when it comes to land use regulations.
Okay, yeah, it's fine. So we're at can we say businesses off the street or rear facing? Like the 159 complex has the sports card guy down the back. Can we say those businesses not on the street side? Which, I mean, I would include as the VFW. Right? It's tucked in the back corner. Those businesses can have a sign not to exceed one per complex. And then they could thumb wrestle over it with the landowner, maybe they could rotate through.
Then let's pick on one on Pearl Street. You know, that does have a sign, and they have list all the businesses
Yeah.
on their sign.
Yeah,
As you're down on Post Office Square. Thing is that unless you know that the Asian market is in the back, you don't know.
right. No, I completely agree. And the other thing I wanna
Or
take,
any of the businesses upstairs above.
Right.
Above the post office
Well,
or near the school.
and,
You
yeah.
don't know what's up there.
Right.
unless-
And so was hoping to strike some sort of compromise between, I don't wanna visually see that, and holy crap, there's a whole lot of businesses that are leaving Essex Junction. And I don't know if a sandwich board would help them or not, but it can't hurt them.
I guess we need to move this on. I don't think it's gonna be solved tonight. I think, again, I'll reiterate. For me, I'd like to see a definition of open and closed. Or I don't, to move forward with any of these, for me. And I'd like to. I don't think we're gonna figure out in time for this revision anything that needs a lot of research. Was kind of what I think. But, yeah,
So
Yeah, and I think, Tim, those are great questions, and I think we can try to do some more research and see if there's some kind of creative way to make it a real, true time, place, and manner regulation that we can enforce in some way. I think it's gonna probably take a lot more searching. We may, and I don't wanna say that Chris hasn't thought about this already, because he has, and so we may not get to a different place than we've gotten to already, but it's possible. That's gonna take some time.
Respectfully, the open and close seems like a very important issue to resolve. That doesn't seem like something that should be a rider on a sandwich board decision. To me, that just feels like that should be something that is in the next tranche of LDC amendment updates. And I don't know, clearly we're not gonna be able to just decide on something tonight.
Or to add on to that, Elijah, is open and closed, should that be in the LEC? Or should that be an ordinance for the city as opposed to, because I mean, it's a lot of things have been thrown into the LEC and they really should be a freestanding ordinance. So I mean, we're trying to get that LDC to do just about everything for us, and sometimes it
Oh, I
can't.
agree. Well, then the question becomes, is there anything in the way that 714 is written in this respect that would contradict any ordinance that we're one day could possibly, probably no time soon, put in place? I haven't read it in 3 weeks, so I don't know.
So devil's advocate is if we leave the LEC 714 the way you guys left it on January 22nd, we haven't really gone forward, but we haven't really gone backward. We're sort of similar to status quo, but not quite. Chris, can you live with it until the next time we?
I certainly can.
Okay, I mean, can the city council live with the fact that the streets could be cluttered with sandwich boards and continue to be there? I'm just trying to say, hey, we can plan to move on, or we can just say, okay, how can we solve this?
Amber?
My hand was up probably 10 minutes ago in an attempt like you were trying to do to kind of bring it back to, after an hour of discussion, I think we're at the same spot. We don't know where to go. And, the reason I asked the question of Regina was to try to get to the point here. I don't think we're going to resolve this tonight. So based on what Regina said, my basic motion on the table would be to leave it as it's previously warned, which includes the current regulations, to my understanding. And we continue to have this discussion and allow staff to do research and such, but we're not there. We're not there.
Yeah.
And I would say the open and close uncertainties it's not a very common problem. Like we have maybe one or two businesses that try to stretch a definition of what's open, but for most retail businesses, it's pretty obvious when they're closed. So if clarification on what is really defined as open, like the definition of open hours is punted to the future, I don't think it would have a huge impact immediately on it.
Yeah, the idea for me anyway was not to create more work that required research and hours of community development time to find a solution to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds like there's consensus with what Amber said.
Yes.
Looks that way. Okay, next one.
Next topic.
Oh, wait, that's even better. Comprehensive plan. We're having so much fun.
So in your packets, there have been a lot of there's a slide deck in there with some general information on the statutory basis of comprehensive plans and how like what it actually does and how it's updated. I don't need to go over the text that you can read through, but I will move forward to the parts that affect the city's process the most right now. So there are parts of the comprehensive plan that have to be there. This is the list of the topics that have to be covered. And there can be topics beyond that. The plans expire every 8 years, so that means the existing plan is, I think I say that's here. Let's see, yeah, the existing plan is good until August 2027. The FY26 work plan does includes a project to update this comprehensive plan. And I am wanting to apply for municipal planning grants to expand the scope of that, to be able to do a little more public engagement, but in the draft budget, it's $10,000, which will barely cover the cost of technical assistance that we would need to just update some charts and do some data analysis. So to really do a good job, we would need the municipal planning grants. So let's see. Yeah, so this comprehensive plan, it is supposed to impact how the zoning and subdivision bylaws are written, and so that has to be a response to the comprehensive plan. There are other flood hazard bylaws, local ordinances, things like that, right? That can be implemented as in response to the comprehensive plan update. And then there's also stuff about, like, there are also ways to implement the municipal plan through non-regulatory measures, like just investment in capital. And also, how does this relate to the community vision and strategic action plan that was done last year? I think there are kind of two levels to the strategic action plan and community vision. The community vision definitely is super high level statement above the comprehensive plan. I think there are strategic, then there are these strategic actions that have to be slotted in and integrated with this updated comprehensive plan. And this is what the strategic vision, this is what the vision was that came out of last year's work. And I'll read this out because I think it is really important that we keep this in mind. Some of what was written in here is intended to go into the comprehensive plan. The city of Essex Junction will be known for its inclusive and welcoming ethos. As a result, the population is both economically and ethnically diverse. The economic approach is community-led while strongly focusing on adapting and growing as a community. Community connectivity is significant in relation to amenities, activities, and engagements, as well as practicality via cycle lanes, trails, and public transportation. Walkability and cycling are encouraged, and there are passive and active green spaces within the city. Inclusivity and equity are demonstrated via affordable housing, vertical development, incentives, and new businesses. There is investment in the public good and shared amenities and resources that creates desirable living conditions. There's a focus on community vitality across the city with vibrant amenities and activities. The enviable location is attractive to people wishing to move to the city due to its amenities, characters, sense of community, and proximity to the airport, Burlington, and the landscape of Vermont. So, and anything that is written into the comprehensive plan, at least in theory, should kind of reflect it. And these are the strategic pillars that were ranked in terms of importance for action over the next 5 years. So from that, I'm thinking that a comprehensive plan update, there are 5 topics of focus that we should spend time and energy on. Housing, future land use map, the energy plan, economic development, and transportation connectivity. So, and housing is going to be, continue to be a big topic for many reasons, and this is a part of it. The state just released a new statewide housing needs assessment, and this housing needs assessment is feeding into statewide and regional housing targets. The regional housing targets were actually just released a few weeks ago, and those each regional planning commission is breaking them down into municipal goals, basically, municipalized housing targets, and this should be available by mid-2025. Comprehensive plans should demonstrate an effort to work towards these housing targets. And from the housing needs assessments, these are some top level numbers that we're contending with. 36,000 homes needed in Vermont between 2025 and 2029. These are new homes, and there are many pieces of that. If you just achieve, you just, 2,269 would just achieve replacing lost homes, and so on. So to really, take care of, and address the housing crisis, this number is pretty high. And the current, rate of housing construction in Vermont is well below the 5,000 to 7,000 homes needed, per year to meet demand. You've probably seen this in the news, many times. And also Chittenden County has an exceptionally low rental vacancy rates. This is 2022, but I don't think it's really gotten any better. I don't have the current number. Yeah, the majority of renters in Chittenden County are now spending over 30% of their household income on rent. And 27% is spending over 50%. Pretty extreme. So, yeah, and all this comes, we're gonna get to municipal housing targets somehow. This plan is gonna have to show an effort to address that. This is not, these numbers I've just put together. This is how we've been doing over the last 5 years in terms of housing production. There's a number of units permitted every year, and there's a lag, and also the number that's actually built is lower, because sometimes you pull permits and you don't actually build, or or there's some loss, some units that are lost, demolished, that's partially replaced. So I'm thinking that the numbers that we're gonna get are gonna be require about 100 to 200 new units per year. This is what we're looking at right now. So yeah, housing is gonna be a big topic. We're gonna have to spend a lot of time on it. The future land use map is gonna be very much related to the talk about Act 250 reforms and the context-based jurisdiction. So the change in the Act 250 rules that will be based on whether a municipality or an area is considered a tier 1A or tier 1B or whatnot. So I think the relationship between the regional land use map, which the CCRPC is working on and will be trying to finalize within by mid-year, and how that gets implemented at the municipal level, is that you're going to see from CCRPC's draft map that's there's not going to be very many colors on their map within Essex Junction. It's just probably going to be 1 or 2 different areas. It's very high level, it's very generalized, and you can, through the comprehensive plan, there's an opportunity to dive into a little more detail and have it be a little bit more fine grained. And you could even go more fine grained in the zoning map, even though right now the zoning map and the comprehensive plan future land use map for Essex Junction is the same. It kind of defeats the purpose to have it that way, but I think best practice would be to have something that's higher, that's like mid-level at the comprehensive plan, and then more detailed in the actual zoning regulations. I think there needs to be work on the energy plan, because right now the enhanced energy plan is joint with the town, and the town is making their own town-specific enhanced energy plan. Economic development. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about that already, and really transportation. The big question here is just that other topics, high-level topics that the Planning Commission should be prepared to spend time on throughout this comprehensive plan process. And I don't know, Jane, if you have any other way to point this in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, the other things I'll just point out, your current comprehensive plan was pre-decision, merger, separation, merger, separation, merger, separation.
You did that
And
so well.
so.
We covered every single one.
Yeah. And it, in a similar way to our new 6 pillars, the current comprehensive plan is, a little bit focused in the framework of the heart and soul. I forget what those called, vision statements or something. So it's certainly, the plan itself definitely needs some updating. I think in terms of big picture, these kind of 5 topic areas seem to be likely the ones that sort of will take the most focus and figure out, really where the community wants to go. But we thought to sort of help focus in this conversation a little bit, we would kind of start with that and just see if we missed anything sort of big topic wise.
Well, what's not there and will become critical because the state may push us there. They'd be just lovely pushing us to places. Is how high do we want to go? Oh, hey, no, you got a year and a half to think about it, because until, that's all we've got. So.
Well, that's very much in housing.
And
Like
that's in housing, okay, but unless we've got a decision, the state's already said you can go an extra story. So what if they wanna do 2 stories of affordable housing?
So,
The state would probably be thrilled to death.
yeah.
But,
I think the intention of the Connect the Junction project is to provide a place for you folks to have enough information to make a decision on that. That's the idea.
well,
And we don't have that yet, but the hope is that we will have that first. And that'll be incorporated into the comprehensive plan in some kind of better way, but it's completely all tied together. It's tied with how are we gonna do 100, 200 units a
okay.
year and all that.
Yes, how many units? And yeah, I've heard lots of people say we can't solve the county's problem, all on our own. This is true. It's a countywide thing. So, but the planning commission's has had their hands tied by a decision that the council, as the village trustees made, to go there. So, not wanting to have to buck the system too much, although nothing's really stopped me in the past, is to ask that question for you guys to think about it. How high are you willing to go?
I think Virginia just gave you the answer. I think we're waiting for me. We didn't do it the last round because I didn't like it being, if I remember correctly, just sort of, it's 6 or 7 stories here and there's a house. My hope from some of the TOD project is to get a much finer look at how we can buffer some of these things, because I think that's what the community actually wants. They want to see creative development where you might start next to a single family home neighborhood at 2 or 3 stories, and you might build as you build away from it, even in the same building, for instance, so that you're not looming over. My concern on the previous LDC discussions was around those buffer areas. So we had quite the conversation a couple years in a row around this, or for a few months, especially around building height. I'm very open personally to going higher, but I want to see how this project comes in first and what that means for those areas specifically. And you've been around in that conversation longer than I have, but
Well, yeah, I was responsible for, Lori Hilton and I were responsible for capping it where the Main Street building is now, Pearl Street building, so. Times have changed, the rules have changed, and I agree, we need to see what it comes from the state on that.
So, a couple of comments here. One is, we at the planning commission have asked for this joint meeting for a while. And I think, we're at a point now with the LDC amendments and so on, that we were thinking about what we want to do in the future. What should we focus on? What are the priorities of the council? The comprehensive plan obviously is a priority. And I like the way Chris has broken it out. And I just wanted to add a few things because I came prepared tonight to talk about what my priorities would be if we move forward. First of all, a couple of things is, some of you know I'm on the Rural Resilience and Adaptation Subcommittee for the Vermont Climate Council. And the climate action plan is now with the council based on the 5 subcommittees that drafted, well, 3 subcommittees drafted actions and strategies for the council to consider. Out of the rural resilience and adaptation subcommittee came, and mostly from the climate action office at the ANR, is a requirement, not a requirement, it's a guidelines and a framework will be prepared for how to incorporate hazard mitigation planning and climate adaptation or climate change into municipal planning. So that it will, the old climate action plan had a requirement that municipalities had to have a climate action plan. I think South Burlington has one, I'm not sure if Burlington has one, but to me and the rest of us, it was a burden that wasn't necessary. So right now, what they're talking about is developing some guidelines that would be incorporated into the municipal plan. Those are probably gonna come out next year, early next year. So January 2026. So that would be in the next fiscal year. It would be obviously incorporated into this comprehensive plan. So just a FYI. The other thing, Tim and I talked about this when we went to Beta Technologies. Priorities for the energy focus of the community is weatherization, and it's a high priority for the state. Just like we have a housing needs crisis, and we need 7,000 new homes a year to meet the target. The target for weatherization in the state is 120,000 homes by 2030. Actually, I think it was by 2026, but anyway, in this time period, 40,000 have been done. If you look at Essex Junction, the data I got from the RPC is, I think we've done about, it's a little bit confusing. The town of Essex has done 620 over the last 3 years. I think Essex Junction's probably done about 45, 50. So for me, one of the priorities is to get a handle on where we want to go with the energy focus of this pretty quickly, because it feeds into existing programs at the state level. We don't know what's going to happen with the weatherization adaptation or the weather assistance program. It's slated under Project 2025 to be killed. If it is, there won't be any more funding for the state. But right now we have funding under the WAP program to move forward. So my suggestion is, again, this is about volunteers. We don't have an energy subcommittee or a committee. We don't have an energy committee. I know that there's 2 issues. One is it's $3,000 to have a committee. The other one is staff time to monitor and support the committee. One of the things I'd like to see us focus on is possibly getting together a working group, it's called, of volunteers that would work with the planning commission on where we want to go with energy, so that we don't get caught down the road not complying with state requirements as they move forward. So that's one thing that I'd like to see as we move forward. And again, I thought this meeting was gonna be more of a discussion about what the priorities for the council and what the planning commission should focus on. If we have another meeting, as you suggested, Raj, maybe that we could spend some more time talking about priorities. That's just my priorities. I'm sure other people in the planning commission have priorities as well.
Well, I'd like to see all the 10 components of the comprehensive plan we concentrate on. Yeah, I've experienced in my day that, depending on who was on the planning commission and who was the staff member, depending on where we focused and how much focus we didn't do. So sometimes the comprehensive plan was punted and something was sometimes updated, sometimes it just moved on, hence the map error that you found. So at some point in time, we're going to have to do pieces. I mean, we can always ask the school district to write us a note again, which is what they did last time. But this time, energy and some of the other pieces are a little more critical. We need some time to get those pieces in here. Because again, the comprehensive plan is a vision of where we have seen things, but we don't even have the boots on the ground to even get started unless we start shortly. and try to convince people, let's say I'll pick on Greg Morgan here. We have done economic development in the past, unless we get people and say, okay, that committee of volunteers and say, hey, let's get together and start talking about this. Where can we go with it? Because we aren't going to have those components. We don't have a vision. We don't have an inkling of where we're going to go and take it from where it is now to where are we going to go. We've got an LDC, and usually comprehensive plans leapfrog that LDC to take it forward again the next time going through. So, which means, yes, the reports, the TOD, that we've got the strategic plan where people have talked about it. We've got some components, but we haven't talked about the components. We don't have a vision for where we're going to take those components. So,
I guess in my mind, I don't see that different than the vision that the community just put together.
well, we could go with the strategic vision, okay, and put that in there and say, where can we go? But we need to flesh things out. It's not just, well, yeah, here's this report and we throw it in there. We actually have to believe we're supposed to answer some questions of ourselves as to where are we going to go next? What's our vision? And we haven't done that. That's what happened with the comprehensive plan. You need to put that vision together.
I think we,
Oh, Lane's next.
oh, sorry,
Sorry.
go ahead, Lane.
Thank you. Something I'm noticing about both the strategic planning, all pillars, and the comprehensive plan, and looking at the previous, or the current comprehensive plan. Back when we did Heart and Soul, we agreed that the trustees agreed to bring the core values from the Heart and Soul process there in the comprehensive plan. And one of them was health and recreation. And I just want to point out what I'm not seeing in the comprehensive plan at all, and that I haven't seen, is human services. Even though that is not LDC based or zoning, it is a key part of what makes a community livable. And our residents don't have anywhere to go in Essex Junction for human services. They go to Burlington. But we have unhoused people in our community. We have substance use disorder. CHIPS is the only organization I can think of that really addresses any of this. And CHIPS is underfunded and focuses on teens and tweens. So,
Community justice.
oh, community justice, thank you.
Or several Howard facilities.
But you see what I'm saying, like Cox isn't here, outright Vermont's not here, Spectrum's not here. I personally believe that human services should be one of our pillars. And it at least should be in the comprehensive plan. And you were asking what's missing, that's what I'm saying is missing.
It's on my list to bring up. We did a really interesting look when, we were clearing out of Afghanistan. A bunch of community leaders and representatives got together to see what we could do to bring people here. And we very, very, very unfortunately quickly realized that we have nothing to offer. I don't mean that as it sounds. We had no place to house anyone. We had no services to offer in terms of what was needed at the time. And that has definitely stuck with a bunch of us. It's just like you're talking about. That's not to say that the community hasn't stepped up when it's been needed. We did, this community and the fairgrounds did an awful lot during the pandemic. Other things that happened.
And we have.
We do have very quiet Howard facilities that serve people here. We have the community health center that's moved in, which is quietly wonderful. But we don't have any of that. And we have talked about trying to incorporate what we all did as a community before we separated, which was put 1% to human services of the budget, which the town is still doing. That's a different topic, but yeah, and I don't know how you incorporate all that into the comprehensive plan in terms of the layers that you're dealing with. But when we're talking about housing, especially, we're talking about affordable housing. How do we fold some of those thoughts into, where does that all fit in this? And I'm trying to get my head around what you were saying earlier about we need to do this, this and this. And maybe I'm just confused, but I thought that was part of the work of doing it, and this isn't especially true, this isn't my thing. So I'm just trying to catch up with what you have ahead of you. You know,
It is,
like how it
it
works.
is part of our work, but usually it's facilitated by having an energy committee or an economic committee. Or maybe perhaps, you know, to pick on Elaine's piece, like human services committee or component or whatever. And those right now don't exist.
Right.
So there's a lot of gaping holes. Whereas before, when I last did the comprehensive plan, we could pick pieces out. Like I could pick this, ask the superintendent, yes, I need a statement from the school. Okay, and these are the questions I need to answer. And I hand it over to the superintendent and say, thank you very much, we'll get the response from you, blah, blah, blah. Okay, just to pick on them. And I can't do that for energy because we don't have, you know, we are the housing commission at the moment, okay? Because at one point in time, there was a housing commission when we were joined, but that's not there anymore. There are two individuals who are very interested, but they need more people that they get a solid committee. So it means working on those components as the body of 5 here, plus whoever else we can round up. So that's my concern.
Yeah, if I could build on that, sort of, Elaine, I interrupted before, but, 2020, August 2027 seems like a long ways away. It's not a long ways away when it takes a lot of volunteer work and organizing to get things done. So I'm just wondering in terms of next steps, I mean, again, trying to come back to Diane's point and getting some guidance from the council on where we want to move forward, but it would be good, I think, to get sort of a timeline of when things need to be done. I don't know what the municipal grant process is that an open-ended thing, Chris, or is it time-based?
I think, the application is due sometime in April, I think.
Okay. There's also, a couple of other funds that we might be able to tap into as well in the state, but the point is, if we could get some timeline about when things have to be done, you know, so August 2027, how much further back do you have to be for public warning? How are we gonna engage the public in this? What kind of subcommittees or task forces or task groups or working groups do we need? And maybe that's something that we should be doing. Maybe the planning commission should be focusing on this and trying to give you guys an idea with Chris and Regina, of course, of what the timeline would look like. But I'm just don't want to get caught in a year from now saying, oh my God, we gotta get this done. Sorry, the current comprehensive plan, if you look at that, there's so much in there. But about half of it is stuff that's really not implementable. It's like continue to work with the business community to illustrate blah, blah, blah. It's not an action. And I think that what we need to do is focus on actions that are achievable. And starting from the 6 pillars, you know, Elaine, public services could include human services, you know, so it's just a question of how we're gonna address this. And I don't wanna get caught a year from now saying, oh my God, what are we gonna do? As opposed to thinking a little proactively about it.
Amber, you had your hand up. You're done? Okay.
Well, I guess, go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, just on the timeline, feel through comprehensive plans all the time. It's, typically gonna take you about 2 years of time. So you're still not there yet. That's August 2025, and you've got hopefully a Connect the Junction project to finish first, in theory.
I beg to differ that last time we had a comprehensive plan, LDC, the county trustees or the council sat on it for a year. So we don't have time to sit on it for a year. Because if it takes us a year, this is now the end of fiscal 2025. And the work plan.
Diane, we're in the middle of it.
No,
rush
we're
things
not.
along too much.
No, we're not. Right now, I'm working on having a vote.
I guess I'm trying to figure out what the ask, I'm confused as what you're asking us
The
for.
ask is that if you, as Scott mentioned, if we back that up, okay, we have, it dies in August of 2027. But we have to have you approve it before the deadline. So how long, and there has to be so many hearings, at least 2 hearings beforehand, so if we back up that calendar, we're definitely at the beginning of 2027, if not even sooner, even December 2026. So, it's around the corner. And so if there's time to talk about things, we need to start talking about things now. But, I fear, okay, just like with the LDC and the comprehensive plan, is that if it expires, you start from scratch. I don't think we can do that. It isn't just, or at least that was my vision last time, is that you've got, yes, you have a base to go from, but it expired, so now you need to build everything again. So I don't want to go through that process of having to go and say, okay, everything is, not just updating, it's now, okay, we have to go through the process of creation, even if it is just updating.
I am confident that Chris is gonna put a time frame together that is going to achieve a new comprehensive plan by August 2027. I can tell you today, these things, typically, if we're given it 2 years of time, that's a good amount of time. This will change a little bit depending on whether we get a municipal planning grant or we don't get a municipal planning grant. But that's generally the timeframe. And you're right, there's a whole very clear statutory approval process that we go through, and Chris will be able to put all of that stuff together.
I am really confident that you can do that. Okay, it's just that we've got to start looking at the calendar as to where this goes. My fear last time was that we were on the calendar and we were doing really well. And then suddenly the trustees at the time sat on it. And it got down to the end where it had to be approved or it's started over. And I don't want to be in that boat again.
In the interest of time, I've heard you, I think Regina's heard you,
Okay.
we've kind of running over. One of my suggestions at this part of the conversation around the comprehensive plan was gonna be trying to get together every 6 months, but get a subgroup together quarterly to check in on how your progress is, keeping us up to date, other things that just happen to be going around, and just generally getting together. Because I think we need to just generally get together more.
Yeah.
I don't think it's realistic to expect we can do that quarterly as 2 big groups, but I think if we can, it doesn't even have to be the same people all the time. You know, it can just be the whole planning commission meeting, members get together when it's convenient with a couple council members and Chris. And stay in communication, what's the issue? But maybe every 6 months, we do this. And try to stay in touch. Because there is an awful lot of work coming out. And yeah, it'd be a lot better if we did it that way, or something like that, so it doesn't have to be that. But definitely getting together more. The only other, I don't know if this was part of the question, I think it sounds like climate's covered. By the colors and everything, what you're talking about, it's also, I'll just voice that. A very big priority for me is to see how that can be incorporated into this whole thing in different places. Especially with all the building, some other communities have been doing some really interesting work, they've only been able to pay attention to just a little bit. But, you know, are there any energy efficiency requirements that we can put in? Are there any renewable energy requirements we can put in some of these buildings? Where it makes sense, where the scale is enough, not to make it difficult to build, but if the scale is big enough that we can then say, we can incentivize something renewable on the building or some other thing, Those are the kind of considerations that we're listening also. I don't think you all are behind. I think we as a community have been wrapped up in what she said earlier that will be not spoken. There's two words for so long that I think the community hasn't had an opportunity to kind of bring some of these topics forward and really give them a thought. And I'm hoping some of that gets incorporated into this where it's possible. And then the next one does even better. But totally hearing I've read it a couple times, and I can only imagine after reading it, how much work went into it. So, hearing it. Sorry.
Anything else on the comprehensive plan, and shall we move on to downtown transportation?
Okay, moving on.
We're moving on, okay.
So there's a memo that's that I sent to you in revised packets. We are at a point where we've gone through a competitive procurement process to select a vendor to take this to 30% design and engineering, which is necessary to get the grants obligated at the federal level. The city, so to use the whole federal amount that was available, $3 million, there would have to be a $750,000 non-federal match. And there is this downtown transportation fund grant that may be available that seems like a good fit. And the city could, I think there's a 20% match requirement for that, but you can use that to then match the larger grant. But if I would need the planning commission to recommend applying for the downtown transportation fund grant and the city council to also to adopt the municipal resolution for downtown transportation fund as presented in order to do this. But Regina, did you have anything to say about the whole situation?
So, the Amtrak grant is a why can't I say it?
Congressionally delegated spending.
Congressionally delegated spending, grant. We think it's a little bit more safe than the other programmatic grants, which is what the Grays grant is for the Connector Junction project. There is definitely some risk because, as Chris just described, we are in pre-award authority stage, which means we are doing some preliminary work in order to get to a place to fully obligate the implementation side of the grant. All of the costs that we're incurring right now can be covered by our $750,000 that we have in the Economic Development Fund, which hopefully will be supplanted with this downtown funding if we get it. So it's not a risk so much in the sense that we won't be able to pay the work that we're got right now. But it is a risk that something could happen to the full implementation funds. But there's not going to be clarity. So I'm generally a risk adverse person, so it's very hard for me to say these words, but I think the only way that we are going to be able to have a chance of using the money is to just keep the pedal to the metal moving forward.
So, quick question. So the funds for the consultants are coming from the Economic Development Fund, or is it, or is partially funded by the grant?
So it is, the city has to front the costs. But because we have pre-award authority, anything that's under those line items that we have pre-award authority for, they are eligible for reimbursement once you get the grants obligated, if you can get the grants obligated.
Okay.
This is another smaller, that you probably sure you look into, but the transportation grant that you considered, is it also a federal source?
No,
It's not, okay.
that's why that's why I consider this a very good bid.
Yep.
They will also want us to build the project.
Like pedal to the metal.
Really appreciate that.
I don't, yeah, I think live fast and take chances.
A sandwich board.
You know,
It's a certain distance.
ever this community needed anything, it is an Amtrak rehab.
Yeah.
No.
We waited so long.
Yes.
Let's keep going.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you. Will do. Oh, yes.
I move that the planning commission recommend applying for the downtown transportation grant for the Essex Junction multimodal train and bus station improvement project.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
I move that the city council adopt the municipal resolution for downtown transportation fund as presented.
Second.
Great, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Great, motion passes unanimously. Excellent.
Would you slack?
I will pass, so I will send the form out for signing electronically.
Okay. Do we all have to sign or just?
Well, a majority of the of the city council needs to sign in, and just the chair of the planning commission.
So,
Wonderful. Cannot wait for Amtrak. I can't even begin to tell you.
Keep waiting, it's still gonna be a long
You
time.
know, I know, but when I moved in here and it was that little Vermont Federal Bank,
I think that's.
and then
Yeah.
it just was falling apart.
All right, sorry.
Okay, sorry, focus.
I'm going to move that the city council, oh wait, member updates? The council?
I have one thing. I mentioned this to Chris and Regina recently. I'm also a member of the Essex Rotary, so is Elaine. And Greg Morgan is on here as well. Greg is the chair of our environment committee, and we have a certain amount of funds every year to spend on environmental projects. It's probably in the order of about $4,000 for next fiscal year, plus some leftover from this fiscal year. And we decided, and past projects have been, pollinator gardens. So there's one at the high school, which is gonna be updated in June. There's one at the Brownell Library now, a small one. But this year we wanted to focus on weatherization. So we're starting with an education outreach thing for, Rotary members, but we also wanted to see if any of the municipalities that Essex Rotary covers would be interested in using some of the funds for education outreach or some kind of event that could be sponsored, a one-day thing, maybe just an educational, for example, Northeast Kingdom did a fair, a renewable energy weatherization fair, a one-day thing where they had people come in from Efficiency Vermont, from some of the contractors, some of the outreach programs like HEAT, which is Northeast Kingdom, and had prizes and games and stuff. So it would be something we'd do together. We'd talk about what we could use the funds on, but we do have funds if the council is interested. Or the council of the city. So just laying that out there, so we can have a further discussion. It doesn't have to be immediate, it could be anytime in the next 8-10 months.
Nice.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. We have a meeting, May 7th. We're gonna invite people in to talk about this at the Rotary. And by the way, the Rotary covers the city of Essex Junction plus the 4 towns, so Essex, Westford, Jericho, and Underhill. So we're also talking to the towns.
Awesome.
I think just a brief update on the animated infrastructure grant application. Apparently so far, Monterey's Council has not indicated that the funding for this program is being negatively impacted by any federal funding, so hopefully that source is non-federal. There is a applicant webinar set up for next week, which I will attend for more information on top of what's available online. Thank you for your thoughts and input. And after our last meeting, if other commission members have ruminated on what we talked about and you have other thoughts about either art form or location, still would love to have that input. I have been, through Michael, in contact with a couple of educators in the city, preliminarily about engaging students as part of the project. We haven't been able to actually connect to speak yet, but there has been interest both from a local business owner and who is a former teacher and someone who is currently one of the art teachers in the SWD system. So we're looking forward to connecting with them soon when we're able. And again, for the council's benefit, this is just a small arts grant. There are two tiers. The city's would be the applicant. The planning commission is doing the work to prepare the application. It's a two-part application. It's really quite competitive. So we would need to put in a pitch. And then if invited to, then prepare a full application. The pitch is due April 1st. And so it's just high level quick numbers. There are two types of applications. One is basically a planning design application, which is what we're currently considering. Then there's an implementation award. You getting one doesn't guarantee the other, but it also doesn't exclude you from the other. This came up as a possibility last year. The commission didn't have time to prepare an application for the deadline last year, so we're not making an effort now. And the original impetus was just talking about other communities in Chittenden County, for example, or across the state, and interesting public art that people enjoy when they're in other communities, and just as part of more of like the placemaking here, especially now as a new city, great opportunity. And so that's, yeah, kind of, I've been answering questions about it, but that's what that is about.
I'm thrilled to hear this, because I don't know if you know this, but we applied for that grant before.
I didn't.
So 2016, 17.
Yeah.
I was working with McClure Moving that is right up against the bike path.
Yeah.
And they are willing to let a mural be put on their wall.
It's great to know.
And so we applied for, what's it?
Animating infrastructure.
Animating infrastructure grant, didn't make it past the first round.
Yeah.
But I would check with the McClures to
Okay.
see if they're still willing to allow a mural to be put up there.
How much is the grant for?
So the planning grant is only $5,000. And of that, only 20% or $1,000 can be used for admin and outreach and engagement. So that said, I think the council, as part of our interest in public engagement generally, is looking for creative ways to potentially or hopefully solicit significant, sizable public engagement, and that's where one of the initial ideas has been to engage the students in city schools through their arts program.
So, do you want to talk about what's on the other side that was recommended by the consultant?
Oh yeah, Tim, you might be interested in this. So the original, not the original, but the most recent iteration of when this came up last year, was conversation around the retaining wall when you're coming, where you just crossed the bridge, headed north on Park Street.
Oh,
There's
yeah,
a retaining wall
please,
right there.
do something with that wall.
So that's why it came up.
Can we just do that? Do you want to how much for the?
Because that's on public property. It's not necessarily excluded, but in terms of how competitive the program is, with the focus on more kind of public infrastructure, trying to find a location that is kind of public infrastructure in the city.
That wall is public? It
It's
doesn't belong
not.
to the house?
It does,
Oh,
so
God.
we're trying to move on to other locations.
The
So,
owner of the house said, have at it.
so
Have
they have
at
said, they have said that.
So let's just buy some painting.
So yeah, there could be some DIY, but in terms of the application,
Of course, no, we pay the artist, but like, what, so I guess.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry, you're paying the artist.
Amber has her hand up, just so you know.
I know, I was gonna say.
But she's gonna shut you guys
Yeah.
down.
Yes.
She is.
No, we're not
Got it,
going in.
Regina.
Any other staff comments?
You know me so well.
I know, it's coming up to bedtime.
I appreciate the conversation, but Regina knows where I was going. This wasn't warned as a discussion about this, so I just want to bring it back to the member updates, but thank you, Elijah, for that.
This sounds exciting.
Well, this
Let's
actually
definitely
is a
talk-
member update because it is part of our ongoing events.
Definitely want to learn more.
And I do apologize, but I would like Elijah to get out what this other property potentially is.
yeah, you may have noticed, in some of the renderings from the initial POD work, when they were doing downtown hypotheticals, they included a mural on the southern face of the fire station. Basically, the side right where the library main entrance is.
That sure beats the last time when we all painted it.
I'm still looking for
40.
other possible recommendations for locations, but the McClure's is a great tip, but specifically if council or anyone out there listening or reading the minutes has for, basically public infrastructure in the city, that could be the subject of artworks. Doesn't necessarily have to be a mural, but that's kind of our initial gist, but if there are other forms of art in public space related to public infrastructure, that's what we're.
To make Amber happy, I have some ideas I'll reach out to you separately another time. And include everyone, if you like, I don't know, maybe not.
At least the fire station, we can use your ladder.
Any other member comments from anyone? All right, I will, for the counts, staff updates.
I don't have anything else.
Okay. I will move council adjourns.
Second.
Great, all those in favor say aye.
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 Great, we are adjourned.